It was a cold November evening when I received a telegram from Sherlock Holmes. Come at once if convenient. If inconvenient, come all the same. I immediately made my way through the foggy streets of London to Baker Street. Holmes sat beside the fire in his dressing gown, his sharp eyes half closed. "You are late by 7 minutes, Watson," he said. I apologized and explained that my cab had been delayed. Holmes shook his head slightly. "No, you stopped twice. Once for a newspaper, and once because your bootlace broke." I stared at him in amazement. He merely pointed at my shoe and the ink stains on my glove. Before I could answer, Mrs. Hudson entered and announced that a gentleman wished to see Holmes immediately. The visitor was an elderly clockmaker named Elias Whitcomb. His hands trembled as he carried a small wooden box into the room. "My apprentice has disappeared," he said anxiously. "The police think he ran away, but I know Leonard would never abandon the workshop." Holmes leaned forward with interest. "There is more to this story," he said quietly. Whitcomb opened the wooden box. Inside lay a broken pocket watch with shattered glass. The hands were frozen at 12 minutes past 2. Holmes examined it carefully. Whitcomb then handed him a scrap of paper containing a strange message. "Time reveals what men conceal." Holmes smiled faintly. "Very interesting," he murmured. Within the hour, Holmes and I traveled to Whitcomb's workshop in Clerkenwell. The room was filled with ticking clocks of every size. Holmes slowly inspected the place until he stopped before a magnificent astronomical clock, covered with golden moons and silver stars. He crouched near its base and noticed tiny scratches around a hidden compartment. "Someone opened this recently," Holmes said. Whitcomb looked shocked and insisted that nobody knew about the compartment. Holmes opened it with a concealed spring, but it was empty except for dust. The next day, we traced Leonard's final movements. At a tavern nearby, witnesses recalled seeing him argue with a tall man wearing a gray scarf. At the railway station, a porter remembered the same man buying a ticket late at night. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread several newspaper clippings across the table. One article described stolen diplomatic papers that had vanished from the Foreign Office many years earlier. Holmes explained his theory. Lord Ashbury, the owner of the astronomical clock, had once worked for the Foreign Office. Holmes believed the secret compartment inside the clock had been used to hide important documents. Leonard had accidentally discovered the hiding place while repairing the clock, but someone else had already taken the papers. Suddenly, Holmes noticed a suspicious figure outside Baker Street. Without hesitation, we followed the man through dark alleys until he entered an abandoned warehouse beside the river. Inside, we heard voices. One of them belonged to Leonard. Peering through a crack in the wall, I saw the apprentice tied to a chair, while the tall man in the gray scarf pointed a revolver at him. Papers lay scattered on a nearby table. Before the villain could fire, Holmes burst into the room like lightning. A shot exploded into the ceiling as Holmes tackled the man to the ground. I freed Leonard while police whistles sounded outside. Moments later, Inspector Lestrade and several constables rushed into the warehouse. Holmes calmly pointed toward the documents on the table. "The stolen diplomatic papers," he announced. The criminal glared at Holmes with hatred. "You cannot prove anything," he snarled. Holmes smiled coolly. "On the contrary, you have already proved it yourself." Back at Baker Street the following evening, Leonard explained everything. While repairing the astronomical clock, he had discovered the hidden compartment. Before he could tell Whitcomb, the man in the gray scarf confronted him and kidnapped him to learn what he knew. I later asked Holmes how he had guessed Leonard's location. Holmes lifted the broken watch from the table. "The hands stopped at 12 minutes past 2, he explained. "Not an accident. Near the river stands warehouse number 212. The broken watch was meant to point toward the location." I shook my head in admiration. Holmes leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. "My dear Watson," he said, "the world is full of obvious things, which nobody by any chance ever observes."